I thought that we'd be one happy, loving family, and I wasn't prepared for what transpired after we got married.
You walk on eggs more. They're not your children. I wasn't around when they were forming their basic ideas and attitudes and things. I wasn't there.
Today, the social clock that tells us when in life we're supposed to become parents is losing some authority. Not only are teens having their first child earlier than what's considered right, adults in their 30s are having their first child later. And there's a record number of second marriages in which a person becomes a parent one more time. The timing of parenthood is changing. This program looks at the experience of becoming a step-parent, an instant mother or father to a 5-year-old, to a teenager, to someone else's child. Step-parents are discovering, sometimes painfully, that what goes for nuclear families, the ones with just mom, dad, and the kids, doesn't work for step-families. Step-families are different, and in this program we're going to explore how they're different. We'll also discover what they were in the past and what they're likely to be in the future. We'll do all this by getting to know a stepfather and a stepmother. Though their situations had little in common, they shared the basic dilemma of not being first. Elaine Horrigan is a clinical psychologist who specializes in stepfamilies. She's also a stepmother and a founder of a chapter of the National Association of Stepfamilies. This kind of family, she says, is different.
We tend in this country especially to form very tight nuclear families. There's usually a mother and a father and let's say 2 children. And sometimes grandparents aren't even available. They may be on another side of the country. So we tend to have a very exclusive, tight little island. A stepfamily is very different than that. Many times, stepfamilies begin by wanting to recreate that or make it even more tightly knit. And if that's the case, people are headed for real problems.
So it's a mistake for a stepfamily to try to become a nuclear family?
Absolutely. That is deadly. You're on a real collision course. It is not a nuclear family. It is a viable family system that's different, and it operates by different rules. Every person in a stepfamily has experienced a significant loss.
Supposing I was going to be a stepfather and I had not been married before, you're talking about me encountering some loss.
Yes.
And what do I lose?
You would lose being first, being on the scene first. Of course, this person would have, your spouse would have children. You would not be there at the very beginning, so that this person would have had a relationship with the youngsters before you. You don't start at the same place. There's a loss of a series of dreams that would take place in a first-time marriage. Therefore, you're going to feel a sense of loss in terms of not being able to join as quickly or as closely as you might like.
When Lynn Beasley married Penny 6 years ago, he badly wanted to be like a dad to her 5-year-old daughter Heather, his new stepchild. In his first marriage, there were no children.
I wouldn't replace her father. I didn't want to replace her father, but I wanted to be a good enough friend and a buddy and all this, where we could do things like homework together or go for walks, ride bikes, fly kites, play ball, whatever, things that you usually do with your kids.
She liked him. We went places together. She was all for us getting married. From the minute that we got married, she called him Dad. And it wasn't until, 2 weekends later when she went to visit her father that her father said, "I'm your father, he's not."
I can remember complaining that he was taking her every weekend. I mean, I worked 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. And then on the Saturday or Saturday night or Sunday that I have off, she was spending it with Jack. And I was complaining to Penny. I said, on my free time, then I have no time to spend with Heather. We cannot go to the zoo. We cannot go for bike rides, or we can't go for picnics. We can't do anything because she's spending all this time with Jack. I said, no wonder I can't build a relationship.
The problem was worse for Lynn because he had moved into what had been Jack's house.
I insisted on a few things that I probably never should have insisted on, like staying in the same house. I didn't want to take her out of the school she was in. I didn't want to take her away from her friends. I felt bringing new relationship into the family was enough. Wrong.
That is not my house.
He
That
still
is- I
doesn't.
still feel that way after 6 years. I'm living in her ex-husband's house. I felt that from the day I moved in there. I moved into somebody else's house. It's not my house.
Heather felt the same way. This stranger was taking over her house, her dad's house. For someone turning 6, the conflict of loyalty was tremendous.
To the point where every time that she would goof up and call me father or dad or something like that, she'd freeze in mid-word.
Elaine Horrigan.
Loyalty is very, very difficult for children. Little ones, let's say, anywhere from 6 through 11, in particular, that tend to think in absolutes. You can have one mom and one dad, and you can love one mom and one dad, and that is all you can do, because if you deviate from that, then something bad might happen, like the mom and the dad might not love you anymore.
She would never go to Lynn and ask him for anything. She wouldn't go to Lynn with a problem. If she stubbed her toe and Lynn and I were standing there, she would not go to Lynn with that. You know, she'd come in to say, "Can I have a popsicle?" She wouldn't ask him. She'd ask me.
People tend to feel that children should relate closely in about 6 months, and if you look at that, it's really quite absurd. If you made a friend, and this friendship was 6 months old, that's quite new. These children, either through death or divorce, have experienced a loss. Their trust, to some degree, has been shattered. They've been abandoned. Therefore, it's going to take them even a little bit longer to trust an adult figure. But we tend to forget this, and particularly if a step-parent is warm and caring, they can often become real frustrated because they know they've been giving. And the child may, the more they give, may resist and become more and more resentful and more hostile towards them. And then that's quite painful for the step-parent.
Trying hard to be a good step-parent, you might forget a child's history of loss. You might overlook a child's loyalty to the parent who was there first. That's how it was for Lynn. About a year into the marriage, he had had enough.
Penny and I weren't getting along very well, and I wasn't getting along well with Heather, and so I felt that it was time for me to leave, and so I moved out. It's gone about a month, and Penny and I sat down one night and talked and put our feelings out on the table, and then I moved back in and tried it again.
When you have the determination to try again at step-family living, it helps to understand the kind of family you're in. One of the things Elaine Horrigan stresses with clients is having realistic expectations, going in with your eyes open. In a step-family, you get extra sets of relatives, extra in-laws, extra grandparents, extra aunts, uncles, and cousins. Social etiquette becomes a problem. What do you call all these people? Who gets invited to what? Who sits where? Horrigan knows from her own experience as a stepmother that there are no clear guidelines.
Graduations. That can be a real issue. Some schools are only issuing 2 tickets. And then who goes? In my case, we have 4 tickets. And we have grandparents that want to come. And we have brothers and sisters. And oh my goodness, who's going to sit in the pavilion and who's going to sit on the lawn? And how are we going to make the decision?
Etiquette is touchy, but there are more important issues, and more sensitive ones. In a stepfamily, for example, sexuality will take on different meanings than it does in a nuclear family. First, there's the matter of sexual feelings between husband and wife.
The parents really have to be quite tuned in. This is, let's say, a new couple. They may be more demonstrative than they would have been at the same stage in a nuclear family. That demonstration of carrying an infection has to be done with some diplomacy and tact. Children often feel left out. Therefore, it's important not to continually make a display of it and be sensitive to the kids' needs and feelings. And, for example, if you're hugging, sometimes grab them and pull them in.
But as a new step-parent, you have to be aware of something else too, the possibility of sexual tension between yourself and older stepchildren.
Based on the fantasy that they would like to reunite the natural parents, sometimes these youngsters will manipulate and attempt to be provocative with the step-parent. And then the step-parent is really in a stew. What do you do with that set of feelings and behaviors? Hopefully, the step-parent can talk to their spouse about it and get it worked out. All too often, the step-parent will back off or back away from the youngster and not really explain anything. And that's too bad, because sometimes the youngster loses an otherwise close relationship.
Finally, parents have to be sensitive to sexual feelings that may arise between teenagers who are suddenly brought together.
You have a 16-year-old boy from one natural parent and a 15-year-old girl from another, and they're not related, and all of a sudden they're living together in a house. That has to be handled with a great deal of care. Boundaries must be set immediately. It's up to the parents to be really quite firm about that. And sometimes it doesn't work. That might mean that one of the youngsters has to live with the other natural parent for a period of years.
Step-families come in such variety that it's hard to find similarities in their development. And yet Horrigan has identified a pattern. The timetable doesn't fit every family, but it highlights the issues.
Generally, stage 1, which lasts for about 6 months, is the honeymoon stage, and everybody is putting their best foot forward. Basically, after the remarriage, roughly about 6 months, where everyone really tries too hard. The trying too hard is the key. Again, that's not particularly real, and people tend to avoid dealing with the real feelings of fear, of anger, resentment, and threat.
After the honeymoon stage, these negative feelings start to come out. A period of conflict ensues, the second stage.
The natural parent, for example, may get very frightened that they're putting their children through more pain. They've already been through some. There's usually some guilt attached to that anyway. The step-parent may feel very alienated, particularly the one, if the step-parent has been one that's been a giver or a very warm person and they've tried very hard. If the natural parent does not support the negative feelings of the step-parent at that point and can't hear that, then the step-parent may become even more alienated.
The natural parent has to understand the source of the step-parent's negative feelings. Then, according to Horrigan, the natural parent can bring the step-parent into the family and give that person credibility. The final stage, she says, begins about 3 years into the marriage. It's a time of letting go.
Where you realize that there are certain things that are going to be different in this family system, that they're not going to be the same as a nuclear family system, and you have to let go of some of the myths, ideals, and dreams that you may have brought into this relationship. That's hard, but it's very rewarding, because as you let go, the child usually is going to come back in. So you have to let go in order to have them come close.
What would it be like to start over at the beginning of step-parenting, knowing what you know now?
Well, I think it would be a whole lot easier. My feelings would be a whole lot different. I wouldn't expect to have a loving relationship right off the bat. And I would know that I don't have to love Heather every minute. There's been times where there's been weeks that I go by where I'm glad if she goes over to her father's, or if I don't see her, I don't miss her.
It's been 5 years now since Lynn moved out of the house and back in again. During that time, Heather's father, Jack, remarried and became involved in another family. That helped. It also helped to get some counseling and join a step-family association. And though it continues to be a struggle, there are moments when everyone in Heather's family seems to know what a step-family is, a complex system that operates by its own rules. Recently, Heather sought Lynn out for help with a school assignment. She was supposed to draw a family tree.
She dropped it on my lap as she's going to bed, and please help me, So I worked on it all night for probably 2 or 3 nights.
Well, she was real serious about the fact that she had to put everyone on the family tree. She started with herself at the top and then put like Jack and I.
And then she's got her stepfather and her stepmother, and then their families, and then the
But
mother and father's
she was
families.
worried about that. She said, well, how are all these related? Trying to put them down on a piece of paper was hard. But she did it, and she was very proud of the fact that she turned it in the way she wanted to turn it in.
Right, and the tree had a whole lot of branches on it.
Yeah, it
A whole
did.
lot of branches.
Today, the number of step-families, these families with a whole lot of branches, is on the rise. But step-families are not a new phenomenon. Back in the 17th century, they were quite common. At that time, most marriages were ended by the death of one of the spouses, and the remarriage rate of widows and widowers was high. A stepchild, in the original meaning of the term, was an orphaned child or a bereaved child, not a child of divorce. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the number of stepfamilies declined. Then, in the middle of the 20th century, a new pattern emerged. Rates of divorce began to soar, particularly in the 1960s and 1970s. 1974 was the first year that more marriages in the United States were ended by divorce than by death. This is Helen Weingarten, a professor of social work and an expert on the family.
I guess you could say a lot of people are divorcing and a lot of people are remarrying. I think for the people who are experiencing that, it's enough of, whether it's 50% or 60%, there are enough people who are doing it that everybody probably knows somebody, or more than one somebody, who is divorcing and remarrying. And so in a much more intimate way than in previous decades, learning about what those challenges are.
Today, divorce and remarriage are making for a lot of stepfamilies, and the timing of family events, the social clock governing parenthood, is changing. But in the middle of the change, there's one consistent pattern. In stepfamily households, it's usually the father who's the step-parent. That's because divorced mothers more frequently maintain custody of their children. So it's fathers, not mothers, who do the moving from one family to the next. What are the long-range effects on children of this movement of fathers? The studies that would answer the question have yet to be done. Professor Weingarten wonders about something else. In many cases, stepchildren are flooded with adult attention.
Well, if we look at sort of the traditional farm family, there were so many kids that parents, again, were not the major socializers of their children because kids were being socialized by brothers and sisters, etc. So now we have a situation with families that have one or two children giving a great deal of attention to that child. And then when you have two families that are focusing all this kind of attention on their kids, it's a rather awesome notion.
Penny Beasley is equally astounded.
Christmas time, how many houses do you get to go to? These kids rake it in. They love it. The thing is, they don't appreciate it. As far as I'm concerned, most of the kids, I know Heather doesn't. Heather doesn't appreciate that she gets presents from 17 people instead of the normal 2.
That will have influence on sort of character development, but the direction of that is not clear, and we're certainly not looking at what kind of adults these kids are going to become.
Lynn Beasley has compared his childhood with Heather's.
I have a hard time accepting her talking back to me or even talking back to her mother. I mean, if we talk back to our mother the way she does, I wouldn't have lived. My father would have killed me. I feel she needs more discipline, and she can't have everything that she wants, and that it won't do her any good for the rest of her life, I think.
Certainly one of the things that I've seen couples who've come to me in my clinical practice worrying about is the fact that sometimes they say, well, my son never has to resolve an issue with me because in 2 days he knows he's going to be visiting with his dad. And so I never feel like we're solving the problems together because there's always an exit.
Having an exit may not be good for many children, but in some situations, children may benefit.
They learn that adults don't all come in the same packages, that there are real choices, that not all fathers batter, not all mothers drink. There are as many lessons probably kids can learn and adults can learn from a successful remarriage as there are lessons to be learned.
They've always called me Carol. That's how I was introduced to them, and I can't have them call me Mom They have a mother. Their mother is alive. They live with their mother. I mean, I never saw myself in that position as mother. I'm not their mother. I'm their stepmother, for whatever that is. I'd rather be their friend.
When Carol Coast married Don 2.5 years ago, she began a new relationship with his 2 sons, and Don did the same with her 2 daughters. All 4 children were on the verge of adolescence. Step-families are complicated enough, but when 2 sets of kids are involved, they get even trickier. Don, Carol, and the girls had been living together for over a year when wedding plans were announced. As a unit, the 4 of them had been through the honeymoon stage. They had learned how to deal with conflict. The girls liked the idea of making the foursome permanent. They liked this father.
Their father walked away when we got divorced, so even though I didn't get married right away, they didn't always like some of the people that I dated, but they did like Donald. He showed them a lot of attention and was very patient, and, it helped the girls, so they think he's great.
It was different with Don's sons. The 2 of them had been living with their mother and had been household guests only occasionally. The younger was upset by the mention of marriage.
And I sat down and I talked to him and wanted, in an open discussion, what was upsetting him. And he was concerned about would he still have a father, and would I be his mother? And I reassured him that yes, Don would be his father, and he would always be his father. And that no, I wouldn't be his mother. He has a mother. I was not looking to be his mother.
The older boy was more than upset.
The younger one had made a little picture from school, and it was, "I love you, Dad." And on the bottom, he added to it, "I like you, Carol." And we put it up on the refrigerator. And when we had said we were going to get married, the older one came out at night, and he raced, "I like you, Carol," to "I hate you, Carol." That hurt. That really did. But,
It hurt because Carol thought she understood what her new stepson was saying.
You're just destroying everything that I want, because I think he really hopes that his parents would get back together. It was very hard for him.
And it was very hard for Carol. But she learned the value of waiting things out, of not expecting too much. That had paid off before she was married, and it did afterwards.
And sometimes the little things probably get on your nerves more than some big things.
For example, table manners?
Ah, yes. Yeah, that is, that's a bugaboo for me, I suppose. I was raised in you sat at the table and you ate a certain way and you behaved yourself, and my husband's children were not as restrictive. And having them come in and maybe get up in the beginning when we were first living together and, "Well, I'm done, I'm leaving." Or, I don't know, picking up food with their hands. These things really kind of frustrated me at times, and I finally learned. My daughter said to me one day, "Mom, just back up. That's the one area that really irks the boys," because the boys had been talking to her, especially the older one. She said, "Mom, back up. Just back up. Leave it alone."
In this and other matters, Carol learned to take her cue from the kids and let go. It helped that from the beginning, all the children pretty much liked each other. Early on, the older boy had taken the older girl to a football game.
Big stuff. I mean, he's 2 years older than her, and here he was, 9th grader taking the 7th grader. They went as friends, and I'm sure he viewed it as friends. But I think she had a little crush on him. She got past that, I think. They have a very close relationship, and they share a lot of things. And if she's got questions about things in school or relationships with people, she talks to him, and I think vice versa, he does to her. When they have gripes about us, I'm sure they get their little heads together.
It helped, too, that Carol knew the way to a 16-year-old's heart, even one that had once felt hatred. The way? Wheels.
When he first got his permit, he would drive me anywhere. "Carol, let's go. You need to take a ride? I'll drive you." I used to let him drive all the time, where I think his dad was a little more nervous with him and more critical. I perhaps was not. It may be reversed when I'm doing it with my older daughter, but I was a little more lenient with him and said, "Yeah, here's the keys. Just be careful."
As Carol's stepfamily worked through some conflicts and let go of some unrealistic assumptions, they came to like and accept each other. Even table manners got better. It's been a satisfying experience, but still, like most parents, Carol looks forward to the day when the children, hers and his, will have flown the coop.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's nice to have all of them, but yeah, it would be nice. We think, well, a few years, this one will be gone, that one will be gone. Boy, it'll be really nice. Children do take a lot out of your life, out of your personal time, out of your finances. I mean, you know, 4 kids are a financial drain, so to speak. We look for economic freedom, but yet having them come back.
We're learning that a step family is more complex than a nuclear family, that it has its own history of loss, its own stages of development, its own problems with loyalty, sexuality, and etiquette. A step family seems to work best when it grows slowly and when its boundaries are kept open. And step parents seem to be happiest when they realize they weren't the first to nurture a child or to lay down the rules. What kind of adults will stepchildren become? What will they learn from their parents' experience? Like Carol Coast, we can hope. What do you hope your new marriage will mean to your kids?
The marriage can work. Yeah, the marriage can work.